I'm the former Vice Chairman of the Riga Township Planning Commission. I'm now a Director of the Interstate Informed Citizens Coalition. We've invited Mr. James to speak tonight. He comes at our expense. I'd like to read you a small introduction. We'll turn it over to Mr. James. Mr. James is the former president of James Anderson Associates, an acoustical consulting firm whose clients include Fortune 100 companies from 1983 until 2006. The company grew from the original two partners to a staff of over 40 acoustical engineers, industrial hygienists, and technicians. As president and principal consultant, he and his partner developed partnerships with companies such as General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Goodyear Rubber Company, Anheuser-Busch, and Deere & Company, as well as many smaller firms. Service included consulting on community noise issues for existing plants where complaints led to governmental actions against the firms, or site selection and planning for new facilities to determine compatibility with the proposed facility and the existing neighborhood. In addition to his consulting interests, Mr. James has served as an adjunct to Michigan State University's Department of Communicative Disorders for 20 years. Until 2006, Mr. James was a member of ANSI's S12 committee, which has oversight responsibility for acoustical test methods and procedures used to standardize the work of acousticians and noise control engineers for measuring sound and assessing land use compatibility. In 2008, Mr. James and his collaborator, George Camperman, prepared a manuscript describing appropriate noise criteria for use in regulations and permitting guidelines for wind turbine projects to prevent adverse health effects for people living near the footprint of rural wilderness wind utilities. These guidelines have been used worldwide as the basis for local wind turbine siting guidelines. They were asked by ASA ANSI to participate in the formal review and comment process on the current draft revision of the IEC 61400-11 standard for measuring wind turbine sound power levels. This international standard is used worldwide to assess the sound data used as input to sound propagation models by the wind project developers. All suggestions submitted by Mr. James and his partner, Mr. Camperman, were adopted by the U.S. ANSI ASA committee charged with the review of the IEC standard. Frankly, Mr. James is one of the world's foremost authorities on acoustic impacts of industrial wind turbines. He's testified all across North America. His word on this is gold. I give you Mr. Rick James.
Thank you. That was very kind. Am I audible in the back, or do I have to hold it right up to my mouth? If anyone has trouble hearing me, just let me know. I've been asked to talk tonight about the effect of wind turbine noise and its impact on health. Indirectly, I'm also talking about what we need to do to make sure that we don't have those adverse health effects. We go to the next slide. As Mr. Goldberg, was saying, we're looking at two types of noise. One is audible sound, which, if we're looking at a piano, and this is the same example he was giving, basically covers the range from about 20 hertz on up to, well, for a young teenager, probably around 16 to 20,000 hertz. Wind turbine, the sounds that wind turbines make in this range are from an entirely different process than the sounds they make in this lower infrasound range. When we talk about infrasound, I like to use an example of a thunderstorm or a lightning strike at a distance. If you're wondering what infrasound feels like or sounds like, and you remember a thunderstorm during the summer where all you pick up from the distance is a rumble that kind of shakes your house, that's infrasound. Now, the issue as to whether it's audible or not, we'll get to a little bit later. But for the purposes of the discussion, we're looking at two different things, infrasound and audible sounds. Next slide. Just as we have two different ranges of sound we're looking at, there's two different organs involved in perceiving this. Audible sound is perceived by this portion of the inner ear, the cochlea. And as you can see, and maybe you can't if you're very far back, but there's a set of nerves coming off that basically focus on the audible, the perception of audible sounds from this organ. We have this other organ up on top, the Isles of Corti, which are an entirely different set of nerves going to a different part of the brain, and these are your sense of balance. Stimulation of these organs can make you dizzy. For example, if you turn around rapidly in one spot, you're stimulating these organs, and when you're done turning around, you may still have the perception of turning because you've disturbed the fluids in these organs. Anything that causes these to react goes to a part of the brain that deals with our sense of where our body is, of motion. And like I said, it may be part of the same organ as the auditory system, but it is an entirely different organ in the way the body handles it. Next slide. We're talking about, again, two types of sound from wind turbines. As the blades turn, we have what I would say is a reasonably steady sound. It's a sound that, if you're listening to it, it might sound like traffic in the distance or an airport in the distance, where you can't hear the discrete machines or cars. It's just kind of a steady noise with this aerodynamic sound to it. In addition to that, depending upon what the weather conditions are where the blades are turning, we can get swishes and thumps. We also have periodic mechanical sounds as the nacelle rotates. Inside homes, the lower frequency and the infrasound from the wind turbines can create a rumble. And one of the things that has been fairly well established over the last 10 years is that when people react to wind turbine sounds, they have a higher annoyance level for a wind turbine sound than other common community noise sources. So if we're comparing the noise of a car or traffic or a highway or an airport, we find that people react to wind turbines differently. It may be okay to be 45 or 55 decibels near a highway, but for wind turbines, that relationship's not going to be held. Let's go to the next slide. What is noise pollution? There's two ways to look at it. One of them is to take the existing, if you're looking at a new process or a new plant coming into a community, you look at what is the quietest time when that machine's going to operate or that plant's going to operate, and how much when the plant is operating will it raise the sound levels. Well, over the years we found that if you only raise the sound levels, and this would be a nighttime sound level for a nighttime operation, 0 to 3 dB, then we're not really going to have much impact. 3 to 6 will have some adverse noise impact, but it'll only be for the most sensitive of the people who are in the community. Sound pressure increases of more than 6, however, begin to have more negative reaction. When we reach 10 decibels, the perception is, and I guess I have to say, when we say that a 10 decibel increase is equivalent to doubling of loudness, that's only true if we're talking about the same noise. So if you put, a fan on, and then you turn it up to a higher speed and it's 10 decibels, that'll sound twice as loud. But if it's a fan, and you're comparing it to the washing machine or to a car pass by, that relationship just doesn't work. It's only when you're comparing the same thing. And this is the way the New York State policy on mitigating noise impacts establishes noise pollution. Basically to try to make sure that all new noise sources coming in only increase the sound from 3 to 6. And if you've seen a noise criteria, this will typically be something that reads background noise plus 5 decibels, or background noise plus 6, depending upon how they're defining it. There's another definition, which is more of a legal definition, and I chose the one that's used in Illinois. Noise pollution is the emission of sound that unreasonably interferes with the enjoyment of life or with any lawful business or activity. So this definition is focused from the perspective of the person receiving the sound. If the noise is so loud that you can no longer use your property the way you previously were using it. For example, if a new facility comes in and you used to have patio parties, but now there's noise from the facility and you can't do it, then that's noise pollution. If you were able to sleep with your windows open before and you no longer can do that, then that's noise pollution. So these are some of the working definitions that we might want to consider. Next slide. Well, focusing on wind turbine noise. We all heard that the Swedes and the Danes and the people from those countries, the Swedish area, are big promoters of wind turbines. What have they found when they've done studies? And this, I think, is a very interesting study. if you look at the big bar, the vast majority of people being exposed to noise in those countries, Sweden and the Netherlands, are exposed to levels between 35 and 40. And this is in terms of what they call LDN, which is a day-night average. If we convert that to our LEQ, a 24 operation at an LEQ of 35 dBA is roughly equal to 41.5. So in those countries that have satisfactorily integrated wind turbines in with their communities, they are limiting the noise that those people are receiving to levels of 40 and lower. Not the 45 and 50 that we're being told here. And as we can also see, as time has moved forward, fewer of the people are being exposed to the higher levels in Sweden. In fact, both of these countries are now looking at reducing their wind turbine siting limits even lower due to adverse community reaction. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, wind turbines, the characteristic of the wind turbine noise means that people are more annoyed to it at lower levels. This graph shows, and it's kind of hard to read it here, but this is aircraft noise, road noise, and other types of transportation noise. And we see the curves for those right in here. If I want to say I'm only going to annoy 10% of the community, and I'm putting in a new highway, then I can set my criteria by coming up here. I follow 10% over, hit the highway, come down. I can have levels at the homes of about 58 decibels. If I want to limit to the same percentage of people who are annoyed with wind turbines, I come over from 10, come to the wind turbine chart, and that ends up being about 35 decibels. The characteristic of wind turbine noise is such that people are more annoyed with it than they are other common community noise sources. Next slide. What is it that makes them more annoying? Well, one of the things that I routinely hear is that people are annoyed by this blade swish. This is a farm over in Wisconsin. It was one of the projects that I followed from conception to completion. And I'm at about 1,300 feet away from this turbine right here. And this up and down pattern, which is about once per second, is the blade swish. It's like the dripping water faucet. It isn't that it's so loud. We're talking 40, I think it looks about 40 dBA right through here, with the levels going up and down roughly about 5 to 10 dB. It isn't that it's so loud, it's that it's repetitive and that it does not stop. Swish, swish, swish. If you get multiple turbines like we have in this area, you then begin to get competing swishes, as we see in this location right here, where they blend together, phasing in and phasing out. But this is one of the reasons why it is more annoying. Next slide. This is a sample I took inside the home of a person living 1,500 feet away from 3 turbines. This is inside the entry vestibule. So we're not outdoors anymore. We're inside the door with a wall protecting us. It's not as thick of a wall as we have for a home. It's a single wall, but it's enough to give a windbreak for people to come into their home. And what we're looking at here is, again, that blade swish rising and falling about once a second. And this is a characteristic of what people on this property basically put up with on an ongoing basis. Next slide. This is from a similar study done over in Britain, including St. Nicholas. This is 9 wind turbines. The nearest wind turbine is 3,000 feet away. We're on the second floor bedroom window, or the second floor bedroom of a farmhouse. And inside the house, we're again picking up that blade swish. So I would say this is one of the reasons why wind turbines are identified as being more annoying than other types of common community noises. Next slide. This is a model prediction using a single turbine at 1,000 feet. And what we're looking at here is what is the sound level This is, the upper line here is a GE 1.5 megawatt turbine, which is one of the workhorses of the industry. The blue line represents a study that was done by Delta, the Danish Electric Light and Technical Authority, where they took 41 wind turbines and averaged the spectrums together to come up with a composite spectrum. And we can see that the GE basically fits in very nicely with that spectrum. We can also see, however, this is frequency on the bottom,